Welcome to Time to Press Pause, real life stories from the C-suite. I'm your host, Ellen Williams, CEO of The Salient Strategist, and today I'm speaking with Ann Sheu. Ann shares two press pause stories that both revolve around the choices we make on how we spend our time. We discuss how often people prioritize work over family and the importance of turning that around. Ann Sheu is CEO and founder of Mpowered Journey, an organization dedicated to helping business leaders achieve not just professional growth, but personal fulfillment as well. As a seasoned entrepreneur and certified business coach, Ann brings a rare blend of strategic expertise and deep empathy to her coaching practice. She's helped countless leaders build resilient teams at work and thriving family lives by aligning their actions with their core values. Ann's ability to turn complexity into clarity and transform challenges into meaningful progress has made her a trusted guide for leaders who want more than just success, they want significance.
Hi, Ann, and welcome to this episode of Time to Press Pause.
So excited to be here today. How are you?
I am great. I am so happy to have you here today. You and I connected on LinkedIn, and through a couple rescheduling, we are finally together, and I'm eager to hear your press pause story.
So I actually have two big pauses in my life, and the first one happened more than a decade ago. And the backstory is that my dad was sick pretty much my entire childhood. He was constantly in and out of the hospitals. He had something that was like a pre-leukemia, and then he had kidney failure, and so he had to have kidney transplant and bone marrow transplants. And he was in and out of the hospital a lot. And in his final hospital stay, we just assumed it was another hospital stay. And so we weren't mentally prepared for that to be the final hospital stay. We just assumed he'll be out in a couple weeks, a couple months, just like he always is. And after he passed, it was just a huge wake-up call of how I was hunting so many important things in my life because I thought that there would be more time later. And it was a huge wake-up call for me. And so after he passed, I actually took a leave from work and just took some time to grieve and process how I had handled that whole situation. His last hospital stay should have been something that I was super present for every moment and just been there. But honestly, I wasn't, because I was just working under the assumption that he would be out and we would have more time. And so after he passed, I had a lot of regret and shame and guilt with how I had spent my last few months with my dad at the hospital. And so it really caused me to reflect on what I was doing with my life and how I was handling the really important relationships in my life, and how oftentimes I was prioritizing work over family because work always felt like it screamed loudest, right? Like it always felt like the fires burned the hottest and I needed to pay attention to them, and that my family would be there later. Like I'll have time later and I'll do it later and I'll go on that vacation with them later and I'll have that conversation with them later. And it just always felt like there was time later. And with my dad passing, it was just a huge wake up call to realize like later's not always guaranteed. That actually was a catalyst for me to go on this entire growth, personal development journey where I really tried to understand, what do I need to be doing with my time, my energy? How do I need to be thinking about my life? How do I get out of the day-to-day of my life and take some time to really zoom out every once in a while? That was the first big pause. And then the second big pause in my life was when I realized that I was in a career that I wasn't necessarily born to do. I like to joke that I have the only Asian mom that didn't want her daughter to be a doctor. She knew me better than I knew me, right? And so I was like, I thought I needed to go to med school. And she knew that I was not good at chemistry or math, all the things that you need to get into med school and to do well in med school. And so she just told me, you shouldn't be a doctor. Don't do it just because you think that's what you should do. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll be a lawyer. And so I went to law school and I practiced law for nearly a decade. And there were many aspects of practicing law that I loved. I loved being in trial. I loved being in the courtroom. I loved being in front of a jury and advocating for my client. But there was also a lot of things in the practice of law that I knew I wasn't naturally born to do. And at the time, at my last job, I was working in an environment that was not great for my mental health. And so I decided it was really time for me to take a pause and think about what I really love to do and what I'm great at and what does that look like. And so I actually left the practice of law and shifted into becoming a coach full time. And so now I'm coaching businesses and their leadership teams to run more efficient, effective businesses. I use the EOS system, Entrepreneur Operating System, and I help businesses build business of their dreams. And then separately, we're coaching families, helping couples get really clear about their family's values and vision and purpose and legacy, and helping make sure that they've got the right habits in place to make that vision a reality. That shift from practicing law to being a coach and a facilitator was really about understanding my hardwiring, what my true talents are, the things that I love to do, who do I want to be serving, who do I want to be working with, and really reflecting on those things and what kind of position, what kind of career, what kind of industry allows me to lean into those gifts and talents and passions. And it really was in the coaching space that I found this place where I really get to be the best version of myself and do the work that really lights me up, fulfills me, and also comes naturally to me. It wasn't like practicing law where it was stressful and I always felt like imposter syndrome. I always felt like I never had any idea what I was doing and that every attorney around me always knew more than me and I could just never catch up and find my footing. And in the coaching space, it feels so natural and comfortable, and it sounds cheesy, but it kind of feels like this is what I was born to do, like leading workshops, facilitating conversations. It's work that comes really easily and is really fulfilling and is fun. So that was my second big pause.
Thank you for sharing two pauses with us. And the first pause was certainly a bit heartbreaking. And I wanted to ask you, what age did you take that pause? How old were you when your dad passed?
Not a numbers person, so you're gonna ask me to do math on the spot. It was late 20s, early 30s.
Thank you. Late 20s, early 30s, because you had said your whole childhood. And I was wondering how
Thank
that
you.
related. Now it makes sense to me because of the introspection you had, where I wasn't sure a young person would have that. So thank you for that clarification. I love that you said things like, I always thought there'd be more time, there'd be time later. And I think that's a common theme at Time to Press Pause because people always think, well, I'll do it down the road. And that doesn't always come. And these wake up calls are jarring. That reminder that life is short, even when you're young. Certainly, 20, late 20s, early 30s is far from old. I do want to explore where you said work screamed the loudest. So, can you talk more about your feelings around that? How it took so much of your attention and how you were able to identify that and diffuse it?
The diffusing of it has been a long journey, but I would say what I see now with working with other couples in the family space and helping them prioritize family in the same way that they have been prioritizing work for their entire careers. What I see is that work oftentimes has very clear roles, responsibilities, goals, priorities. You know what you need to do, you know what you need to execute on, so you know very clearly when you're dropping the ball. In the family space, it's often not as clear cut. We've got these responsibilities, but you can put it off for a day, and then a day becomes a month, and the month becomes a year. It becomes this like slippery slope that you don't even notice that it's happening. It's like the slow boil, and before you realize it, it's been 6 months or a year since you've gone on a date with your significant other, or since if your parents live out of town, since you went and saw your parents for no reason at all. And it's just really easy to essentially put personal life on the back burner because the professional life often feels so urgent and important that we have to take care of it right now. What we work with couples at Mpowered Journey is really helping them understand that your family team is the most important team that you will ever build. And how do you prioritize that family team in the same way that you've been prioritizing your work team for your entire life?
That's so important to be able to see the work life and the family life. You said a couple things that I want to emphasize. The family team, great phrasing. It's equally as important, if not more important, than your professional team. But you also outlined something really interesting to me where we focus on our professional life because there are goals and there's a structure, and we know when we're winning and when we're not, when we're falling behind and we've missed a deadline. But we don't always have that in our personal life. I'll go to the gym tomorrow. Nobody knows I said that. I'll go to the gym the next day, or whatever it is that you're easily willing to put off because you don't have that same kind of family goal system. So I think your family team that hit home with me. And my kids are adults I'm a grandmother. And so I'm thinking back to when my children were younger and how much I did spend on my professional career. I was one of the original work at home moms back in the 90s. And my son, who's an adult now, still says to me, I always thought the person on the phone was more important than I was because I was really good at hold, please. Right. When you put him on hold and you're like, please stop talking. I'm on the phone. And you take off from hold and you're a whole different person. Oh, thank you for holding. And now he's an adult and it's more of a joke, but it was still a little disheartening when I heard him say that the first time. And you do reflect back and you realize some of the priorities and the decisions you make and how they can affect the future. And to your point earlier, we're not even sure how much future there is. Now, the second pause you took, you talked about your imposter syndrome, and we could so have a whole podcast around that. However, how long was that pause between being an attorney and moving into the coach space?
I left the practice of law with an idea of what I was going to be doing next. I was really lucky that I had the benefit of taking a couple of months to really pause, and we did a little bit of traveling. And that space away from home, away from a work setting, really gave me the clarity that I had made the right decision. I think even though I was leaving the practice of law with an idea of what I wanted to do next, I think if I had jumped right into it, it probably would have been too fast, too soon. And it was almost like I needed to take that time away to grieve my former identity. I had spent a decade practicing law. Everybody knew me as an attorney. My entire identity was wrapped up around being a lawyer. And I needed that space to know that I was making the right decision. And really, that space and that pause gave me the confidence to move into the next chapter, knowing that I had made the right decision. And I really do believe that if I hadn't taken that time away, specifically not just time off, but time away from my hometown, where I have so many ties to being a lawyer, it would have been a much harder transition for me.
Transitions aren't easy to begin with. Even though this one was one you had created because you knew you needed to transition, it sounds like that you weren't necessarily terribly unhappy as an attorney. You just realized it wasn't the right fit. And the fact that you said you took the time to grieve the end of that chapter, that's fascinating to me. I have had many pauses in my life and many transitions in my life, but I don't believe I've ever had that moment to grieve. And in retrospect, there was one transition that I probably should have, because similar to yourself, my network knew me as some identity and I was moving to another. And it was okay with me, but it was difficult for them. I might have been better off pausing longer and letting that drift away, would be the way I would see it, so that I could start something new. Really fascinating. And I have one last question for you. What advice would you give other leaders to when they could identify it's time for them to press pause?
I would just say that if you are feeling it, if there's an inkling of, I think it might be time, I would listen to your intuition. I would encourage you to do the work. And what I mean by doing the work, we like to call this your me work. So instead of your homework, this is your own work, your self work, getting really clear about your values, being able to articulate what really fuels your energy, what drives your energy, and then what drains your energy and puts you in a really bad mood. And understanding how those two things interact, your values and your energy, and really understanding what the vision is that you have for your life, so that you can then reverse engineer what you are doing today to make that vision a reality. If you don't have clarity on the long-term vision for your life, at work, we're setting long-term goals for our teams, for our businesses. What do we want to be doing in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? That's the work that I would encourage someone who is thinking about whether it's time to press pause. We call the 10-year dream your decade dream. What's the one singular goal that you want to be true in 10 years that will really be an indicator of success? And when I say success, I'm not talking about financial success. I'm talking about a life where you really feel free to be who you are, lean into your gifts, spend time with people that you love. That reality can only happen if you start with the me work.
That's great advice. We've heard from some of the other people on the podcast to look at your values. You've gone that next step where you marry your values with your energy, and that resonated tremendously with me. So thank you for what I feel is wonderful advice. You put a few things in my head to think about for sure. And thank you for sharing your story and your wisdom with us today.
Thanks so much for having me today.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Time to Press Pause. If you're interested in learning more about Ann, please visit mpoweredfamilies.com. That's MPOWERED families.com. If you're interested in learning more about me, please visit thesalientstrategist.com. And please listen again wherever you listen to your podcasts.